Lucy, I'd love you to tell us about your family connection, which I believe goes back over quite a long way.
Actually, I've got both sides of my family because my father's parents belonged to the Grice and the Bakers, so the Grices were here in 1860-something, and great-grandfather Baker came back with two sons about 1881 to reopen the Erith mine, and he and his two sons lived here until they left about late 1800s, 1889, something like that. But in the meantime, grandmother, who was Annie Grice, had married my grandfather, who was Sid Baker, and so I've got to put in both camps. But they worked the mine. There apparently was a coke making kiln or whatever they were down in the coal mine, and the small coke was made into the small coal was made into coke, burnt for coke, and it was easily washed because there's a waterfall and there was clean, and they didn't have to any machinery. They just put the coal there and it all washed, cleaned, and put in whatever you do to make coke. The Grices have lived around for, I think I'm probably the last of them. Oh no, there's one of the great-grandsons just moved into town not long ago from Exeter. I'm not quite sure when Walter Grice moved out of town, but he moved down to Sydney to somewhere like Summerhill or Ashfield or somewhere, and he and his wife died down there. But the others have lived around, and my grandfather Baker, Sid Baker, they moved away when the coal mine, there was a strike or something, and they never got back to working again. They just closed down and moved off, and they moved up to the New England area. And who else? Yes, well then their sons, my dad and his three brothers, they sort of arrived back in Bundadoon, or a couple have been here. Erith and Harold. Harold and his wife had Lynbrook, which it was now the youth hostel, and Erith was a builder, and he and Harold, Dad was an architect in times, and so between the three of them they either do plans or built houses or whatever, and they sort of petered out, I suppose, really, because one of the Baker boys went up north, up towards Maxville, up that way, and lived up there, and he's got his children, a couple of them are still living up there. Erith Baker, his family have dispersed, gone. Harold didn't have any children. Uncle Harold and Auntie Ruby didn't have any children, and I'm the last of them. We've sort of stuck around for a while, but come back with the three boys who've settled for the moment. The three boys are settled here, but I wouldn't count on staying forever. But who knows? These days everybody moves off and does things. But they've been here the boys have been here for a while, and I think until the children get through school, and then maybe they'll see move on. But yeah.
So those grandchildren are seventh generation.
Great-grandfather Baker and grandfather Baker and my father and me and Peter. Oh yeah, there's seven. I've lived here and here. Well, the year before last, whatever it was, year before last I think it was, for the school prize giving, a couple of times I'd filled in for Jo Gash, and she obviously can't get up to everything, and I just gave her, she gives a prize to one of the classes for something or other. And Peter was giving a prize from the real estate, and Eloise was up on the stage getting, if she was a prefect or school counselor, and I was there. And so I turned to them who was there, I said, the three, and we've all got a button in primary school. 3 generations of us who all got a button in primary school.
Lovely.
Well, it was nice, yes, and in fact it's not long, I must remind the boys, Andrew, I think, suggested that it would be a good idea to plant a tree in the school grounds. And I must, perhaps before Hamish leaves, which is the end of this year, I must jog someone's memory and see that, because the trees that were taken down a few years ago were planted by the Grice girls, the girls who went to school here, Walter Grice's children, and they were pine trees mostly, and they had to be cut down. They were dangerous, or maybe 10 years ago they took them down, maybe more, but a while ago.
So how many acres perhaps?
We had about 25. Walter Grice owned from, where are we, Lynbrook, William Street, across to what is now Bluebell Road. And when the railway line split his property, he split up the land on what at Oral Street side now, among mostly his daughters. I think one son, he had quite a big family. So all of those, and they're all roughly 25 acres, where the sports ground is was one part. Chubb Nurse was one of his daughters, Walter Price's daughters had that. The next door one, the next door, another daughter of Walter Price had our part, and I think Mum and Dad bought that from them. And then Rossnell belonged to Alf Price, who was one of his sons, and that went up to the railway bridge. Well, eventually he bought, because there was an old wooden bridge up there, and the sawmill was across on the Oral Street side. So that's how they came to be all that size, and as they were settled, as whoever lived on them, the road Oral Street was just extended. That's right, and the row of pine trees just beyond Rossville, just down the hill a bit, was the end. I remember the people lived on the other side of it, but they just went through them, through the pine trees. And then eventually the bridge was put in or replaced, and the road was opened up. That was well in the 1930s.
My father used to have to drive a horse and cart with meat on to Winslow. Well, that was where he, met my mother up there. Just the fact that they had meat deliveries in those days. When he was only about 17 or 18, he started going up there, delivering meat off, orders off the cart and cutting meat on the back of the cart. That's how he come to meet her.
So grandfather came to Bundanoon and opened the butcher shop. Is that right?
Well, not actually that butcher shop. It was down in Ebury Street, back of the hotel. That was where they operated out. But when the lease was up, 7 years, he couldn't carry on. So he said, 18 months went by and he started to build his own shop, and then he got into business himself in that old butcher shop.
And it was under the name of Greason's?
Greason and Sons. That's his grandfather.
And so do you know when that was that he would have...
Started up again, about 1910, I think, or something, because, he might have been 7 years or something out of the butchering, and until he got going again, might have been quite a few years went by.
So he had a break between the Ebury Street
shop and the one he got into the... my father was driving a horse and cart up there when he met my mother up there, and then after a while he used to get to Winslow and feed the horse outside Grandma Jeffrey's house and talk to Mum, and then she got cooking him a dinner, and then things went from strength to strength, and that was how it came about.
It's quite a long way to drive a cart to Winslow, isn't it?
Just after the war, when we had not much petrol, my father used to get me to ride a horse. I used to get on a horse. She was an old pacer, and I'd put the one stirrup up here like this and go with him along the track, and he'd put about 8 or 10, this is going back about 1944 or something, when we didn't have much petrol. He'd have these 8 or 10 blocks of ice in the back of this old Morris, and he'd cut meat off the back of that, and we used to have to go with him, my sister Elsie and I, and we'd go up along the road there, and he'd put a basket on my knee and across the saddle, and he'd say, you go down to Mrs. Day and take her meat down and take this block of ice down and deliver 2 or 3, and then I'd do that, and I'd come back and I'd pick him up again. He'd say, go into someone else, and I used to ride nearly all the way to Winslow, and then he'd say, you've done enough now, come home. So I'd ride the old horse home. That was 10 miles. I was about 14 then.
So how did you enjoy your early years in the butchery? Did you have to do an apprentice?
No, with the family. When I left school, my father took me in on his part of the business, because Ronnie and Bob, they were on Uncle Cecil's, and my father got too sick and he couldn't work anymore. I sort of carried on.
Did you have to do something, today we'd call it a TAFE course or something like that?
Wasn't on then, because I know when Michael Earth started here, and Michael put a few apprentices through. If they took an apprentice on, they got help from the government or whatever. But no, I just learnt from the family butcher. In my last butchering years, I worked at Maroon, I worked out at Burrowing, and I worked for Mosses for 10 years, and in those times I learnt more than when I was working with the family butchery, because I got with different fellas that knew more, and they could always teach me something.
That's interesting.
I said to my butchering ending days, I still learn a trick or two from these other fellas.
How interesting. Did you enjoy moving around and going to the different butcheries?
All right, yeah. But now I'm retired and been retired for, well, I worked till I was 68, didn't I, Jude? And now I've retired, I miss people.
Yes.
Really do, because that was my life. Well, if I can't walk past a butcher shop without I've got to talk to the bloke, that's been my life. Plus the farm and, you know, riding horses. And
very active life.
we used to get our stock sent to us by rail, and we used to, you might remember that trucking yard was there? Well, see, I used to get them out, and grandfather before me, blokes told me that grandfather used to, when he was taking them out, sometimes he'd untruck a truck of bullocks, and he'd take them on, and his old dog would bring a truck of sheep behind him, you know. Yeah.
That's wonderful. But they would have had to, but it's just for
Straight
the tape.
up the main street.
Yes, that's right.
But see, this night, my father, we got a truck of bullocks and Bogger something, and they landed here on a Saturday night. Pop had a look at me and said, oh, my father, he said, oh, those cattle have been travelling 2 days, you'll have to get them out tonight. It come nearly dark. So, right, I got the horse and dogs and let them out. You know where they walked? Straight down the footpath. And they were tired. And I'm trying to flog them off the footpath, and they get to the pictures there, and the pictures are just about ready to go in. There was a, you know, in those days, there was a queue out on the road, and there's people scattered everywhere. Me trying to build these, see, they wouldn't hurt anyone, they were that tired. Yeah. But it was a different matter about a week or so later.
That's a funny story. And so they would then have to go right around...
Over the bridge.
Up over the top bridge?
Yes, yeah. See, my father told me that before that bridge was there, they used to have to bring them down the street, and there was big gates, you know where the turnstiles were? You probably remember where the trolleys used to be. There was turnstiles there, and there was big gates, big white gates there, you might remember them. And they used to have to undo the gates and take the bullocks across the track. And he said this night, a bullock ran up the platform and jumped down on the rails, and he said I chased it on the horse, and when it jumped down the horse followed, and he said I turned it back and we put them across the line in front of the pub. That was before that bridge was built. Yeah, that must have been early days. Probably on the single line days. Single line.
But that's quite a long way to take them over the bridge and then back down to the hotel maybe. And,
yeah, or down Amy Street.
Amy Street?
Yeah, along the front of there. And out here, you know, we had good dogs and good horse. I'd always have a good horse, and they always had good horse, and we'd bring them out here and put them in the gate.
Well, I can remember seeing the animals offloaded into that...
Yeah, taking the sheep out.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was two decks of sheep would come there sometimes. Put the dog in and get them out, and away we'd go.
Different story. And so, did you have them out here for long, Mick?
Oh, no, only a fortnight and they'd be all gone, you know. We'd probably killed out, and the bullocks would probably gone then too.
And how many people would the abattoir that's here in sight of your new house, would they have had people working there all day, you know, sort of full time?
No, we had a fellow looking after pigs and that, whatnot, and but we used to come out, my father used to come out before me, and we had a fellow that lived here and worked in the butcher shop, Lansdowne. He used to go over and 2 or 3 killing days. Other than that, they'd work in the shop.
Right.
But there's always was someone there looking after the cattle or feeding the pigs, because we had piggery there too, and we used to cook all the offal up and feed it back to the pigs, you know.
Not allowed this?
No.
Is it?
We used to get the tallow. We used to get about 5 big drums of tallow a week or whatever. And the bones used to throw over, and the sugar company used to come and buy them,
right.
Purified sugar. Tallow was taken away to make soap out. The hides, we used to salt the hides and bullock hides and sheep skins.
What would the hides, where would they go? And the
fellow used to come around, you know, after every 3 weeks, and he'd pick them all up, take the tallow and all that away.
You don't think of that side of the business?
No, that was
Now, I wanted to ask you as well, because I believe you had the iceworks as part of that Erith Street.
Sometimes in the summer, in a hot summer, we could not get enough ice. So Chris, President Oral Histories' husband, he made us a special little room, and we could stockpile it. We could take about 30 or 40 blocks of ice and sort of stockpile it in there so that we could freeze that, and when the real flush time of Christmas time come, we couldn't get enough, so we'd have enough to cover us. But Ronnie and I used to go around Bundanoon 3 times a week and fill these big ice chests up, you know. Yeah, we used to cut them in half, and they were 28 pound each, you know.
Each half or each?
Yeah, they were they come out of big moulds.
Right.
About that wide.
How long would it take to freeze a big block like that?
Oh, we used to have a big tank, half as big as this room, and had salt and that, and ammonia pipes running through to freeze it, and we'd pull them out and tip them out, and then you put water on them, and they were tapered so that the ice would drop out. That's how you'd get them out. So they were about that thick, you know, and about a foot. Yeah, I can remember going in your place.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And you had a bit of hessian over the shoulder?
Yeah, or we carried them in our hand like that, yeah.
Yes, and the big hooks that sort of go in either side. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. We couldn't get enough around here sometimes. Yeah.
So, did that ice making go on?
Yeah, until the fridges came. Because I remember Greenways, I used to go down there and there was 10 flats, and they all got ice. 10.
Right. And you reckon 3 times a week in the normal part of the year you would have to deliver the ice?
Yeah, that's right. And if it got real hot, people would be running out too then.
Different days today, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
It's
and then
amazing.
the fridge came, and then that was the end of that. Less work for us.
Indeed, but interesting times.
Born in Paddington, 13th of June 1946. I was there for a week, then come up here and still here. Now Auntie Miss Tooth started me at school in Mossvale. Later on went to Bundaleen, probably through till 6th class, and then back to Mossvale. The Mossvale High School was where the primary school now is. Yeah, they hadn't built the new high school. I think that was finished in 1963, and that was the year I left. I used to love me maths, spelling, arithmetic. 3 R's, that was it, that's all I was interested in. Just left just before I turned 15. I put my age up 2 months to get a job. Over at the pub, lawn mowing, boiler attendant, believe it or not, which was totally illegal because they had 2 boilers under the pub. It was my job of the morning to get them going, get the hot water happening. And then in the kitchen, just cleaning up the yard, whatever they wanted done, sort of painting. 1962, that would have been. Okay. 63, I went in the post office. Deliver mail. Roger Bell was there. He used to do most of the town. I used to do the street. Deliver telegrams. Every second week I'd be on the exchange. Yeah, from 10 at night till 7 in the morning, I think, or 8 in the morning. I must have been there for probably about 2 years. It was my job to run around all the 5 post office boxes every night to get the mail out of them. Like those little red boxes, them cast iron ones that people used to put the letters in. There was 5 from memory. There was one at the corner of Penrose Road and Fidelis Street. There's one at the top of Hill Street. I think there was one at Rosenthal Avenue on the corner there. And the other one was, I know it was up near the top bridge there. It was up there anyway. 4, there's another one somewhere. Yeah, I think a couple of them got blown up. You know, crack a night or something, somebody would shove a bunger in them or half a stick of gel ignite sometimes. I don't know.
What do you remember about your mum?
Very kind, loving, never used to get angry, no matter what happened. Oh, she was just a great mum.
And your dad?
He was the same, he's the funniest bloke you'd ever meet. He's always coming out with jokes. He was born in England, came out in 1922. He was 21 when he came over. He had a sister and a brother-in-law in Penrose. He spent most of his time in Braidwood, an hour a little one, bit of gold prospecting, planting fruit trees. Met Mum somewhere down the track and I finished up getting married, and that was it. See, Ted, grandfather and his brother, they had the sawmills going. You know, pulling those logs out of the gullies here in Bundaleen, up that tram line and all that. Well, I went into the lone sandstone business and I was doing concrete, and then I had trouble hiring machines to dig house foundations and things, so I ended up buying my own machine in 1972. Did that for another 3 years. Found out I couldn't drive that machine anywhere without getting work for it. So I quit the hard yakka and went into the machine full time in 75. I had the backhoes and went to the excavator. Went to Sydney for 7 years, working for an Irish company, doing subdivisions, driving their machines. Came back and was working for a couple of local earth movers. And I was getting into the hot rods and old cars and bikes and stuff. Not actually restorations, but modification. Chevs, Holden, they were my faves. Triumphs, British and American. I've still got a Harley at the moment, sitting in the shed unregistered. A bit like my brother, we've got 3 tractors. 2 of them are just original unrestored. One's been done up. 2 Fordsons, a 1949 and a 1950. They're totally unrestored, as I found them. And Linda, my wife's got her own little Ferguson, all done up. And I've got a couple of trucks. One I cart the excavator around on, the other one's a 78 Bedford toy, 4-wheel drive, ex-Telecom. Back in the 60s, bought this old iron wheel Fordson tractor, 1927 model, and we had a plough and a few other things at home. So we actually used to use that, ploughing up the paddock. We used a big spud paddock. To use that I'd be hanging onto the plough and he'd be driving and vice versa. Les has got 1 acre now and I've got 2.5, and that's all we've got left. Yeah, Mum died in February 1980. Dad died in November 89. Mum used to be a good painter as well. Yeah, I've got 5 or 6 of her paintings at home. There was one with the animals in it and there's one with a house on it. One's dated 1923. Yeah, I've got photos of the opening of the school gates. That's the sandstone gates. That was my job to build those at their time. And Ken and I put the lids on them and we put our names under. Mine's under one lid and his is under the other. There was no rush to build them. We started them in about 1970 to finish them in 1971. The opening of them, the 100th anniversary, there's a fair crowd of people there.
And Jack had different jobs, and one job he had was delivering parcels up this area. This is how we came to Bundanuren. You went to the bike shop and they were thinking of selling out and they offered it to Jack at a reasonable price. Thank goodness, it was a great little business. In those days it was all bikes, no coffee shop. 76 Jack bought the shop, but it was supposed then to be a weekend business. He used to come home and go back, but it was a full-time business and we moved there, bought the house in 1980.
Who were the owners of the bike shop when you bought it, Jack?
The police sergeant's wife, she was the official owner of it and in charge of it because they lived quite close to the police station. Sergeant Foster, that's right, he eventually moved down the coast.
But Jack, didn't some man have a bike shop before that?
Was that Mr. McNally, Peter McNally?
McNally, yes.
Yes, well they bought the business from McNally when it was
they bought it from McNally.
When it was down the main street, down this end of the main street. Foster's bought the property where the bike shop is now. They bought the property and shifted the bike shop up there.
Jack had 200 bikes and they'd all be out and we'd have a list of people waiting for them. But it was an ideal, Jack was just the right man to run it. He could make the same joke all the time to people who came in, you see. The children had come in out of these 200 bikes and they'd say, Jack, I want that bike I had last year, you know, that green one.
The repair business is quite a pretty full-time business. There's a lot of rebuilding of bikes because you get something cracked up, you could make one bike out of 2, and also we were selling new bikes and I could do trade-in. Trade-in's okay, trade in the old bike, and that's how I acquired a good supply of bikes to hire because trade-in bikes repaired and rearranged and put into the hire section.
I remember the policeman saying once that somebody might have said something about the bikes all over the shop. He said people will just have to realise that this is a bike town and they'll have to be careful. We lived in Railway Parade, I think it is, close to Ewell Avenue. Beautiful position. We were lucky in a way because Jack was friendly with the motel people and Mike Binns was the owner and he was putting on little plays and we both had parts in these plays for a couple of years and groups would come up. He wrote them, Mike wrote them himself. Theatre restaurant, I think they used to call it. Yes,
yeah.
theatre restaurant. And I suppose theatre was my main interest.
What about Brigadoon? Was that going in your time?
Oh yeah,
Well,
it was started while I had the bike shop there. And I always used to take part.
Jack used to ride the penny farthing in all the parades.
They used to start somewhere down about William Street, the whole parade would start and continue along the main street and up around past the police station, across the railway line, the bridge, down past the hotel and up to the local oval where there'd be all sort of activities for the day there.
Is it difficult to ride a penny farthing?
Well, for some people, well, there's not a knack really, yes, its balance is the same as an ordinary bike, only a little bit more concerned, that's all.
But you say, Jack, that the getting up and the getting off is the hardest part, isn't it?
Getting started.
Started.
Once you get started, you've got the knack of getting on and getting off, that's the only thing that they've got to learn.
When did you start riding a penny farthing, Jack?
Oh, well, I think it probably started in Campbelltown because I ran a bike shop there for years. And there's special function on, I'd just borrow one from Sydney, from the firms that I'd be selling bikes for, like Carbine or Speedwell. And I'd just have it for the weekend and take it back at the end.
And you bought one?
And yeah, then I bought one myself.
Well, there's one above the old bike shop right now, I think, isn't there?
It was always there, wasn't it, Jack?
Yeah, the small one, isn't it, right up
Yes.
high? Yeah, that was there when we went there.
And were you the ones who called it the ye old
No,
bike shoppy?
no,
No, it was already that.
no, Fosters would have done that.
You always said you were going to work till you were 70 and you weren't well, so you sold it in 84, that would be,
Right,
wouldn't it?
okay.
You'd be 69 then.
I
It
knew
was a
that.
very interesting, happy business because whole families would come in. They'd sometimes have a little seat on the front for a very small child and a tandem, and everyone was happy. It was good. And if it was busy, I'd come in and book people in. And I think we only charged about $1 for an hour or something like that.
Oh, 80 cents it was.
80 cents.
80 cents for an hour.
We still have good memories of Bundanoon. It
Yeah.
was a great place for visitors, you know, having the national park there and the glowworms. And it's so beautiful because everybody keeps quiet. They have to, don't they? And it's so beautiful. And Jack used to have one day off in the bike shop and we'd always go somewhere. We said we knew more about the Bundanoon area, the people that have lived there for years, because we always went somewhere.
Yeah.
In 1958, we decided we might go into our own business somewhere, so we started looking around. We toured from Grafton down to the Beagle on the south coast looking for a roadhouse or something. Anyhow, eventually we decided on Greg Kachaba's Paragon Cafe in Bundanoon. So then we moved down there and that was the start of that.
Our first day in the shop at Bundanoon was Anzac Day 1958.
When the Paragon was first built, it was built by a chap who later had a cafe at Crookville. His name was
Theo Bernardus.
Anyhow, after we'd been there for maybe 12 months, Theo found he knew Shirley very well and he decided to come down to visit us. So he came down and told us he actually built the shop and his partner and told us all about it. And he said upstairs part was originally built as a dance hall, but the first time they had a dance there, the floor went up and down and the walls went in and out. He said that was the last dance, so then they converted it into a residence upstairs. And when Kajablis and his wife, Mr. Greg Kajablis and his wife, bought from the builders, They lived upstairs. We kept it on as a cafe for about 2 years. In those days, cafes used to have quite a big stock of groceries, and so we had groceries and fruit and vegetables and a milk bar with extensive chocolate display, and also ham and beef. So after about 2 years we built up the grocery trade and we cut out the meals and just carried on as a Paragon store. On Thursday and Friday I used to spend all day delivering down as far as Sutton Forest and Exeter and mainly Bundanon, and we had a couple of extra girls to help us make up the orders.
We sold that shop, would have been late 1962, and because we couldn't start a business within a certain time in the same town, we went up to Sydney and had a self-service shop there until about 1968, and then we came back to Bundanon and reopened the first self-service store.
Mr Mills had a clothing and haberdashery store there. When he moved up the street, the premises were built back in the 1800s sometimes, and was originally owned, the business was owned by James Calverley. He sold a couple of people about 1930, and was, the shop went through several different hands, and then it was probably empty, we understand, for about 18 months or 2 years before we bought it. We fitted the shop out ourselves. Then the day we opened, we had quite a big day, and we ran special free buses from Exeter, Penrose, Winslow and Tallong, I think, down to Bundanon for this opening of the self-service, because it was the first self-service in the district and it was most successful. And I remember clearly our first customer was Lynn Clark. She was then Lynn Watson. We gave away gifts and freebies and tasting and that. It was quite a big day. Newspaper headlines were Bundanon's biggest day ever or something like that. We did a lot of newspaper advertising and had flyers right throughout the whole district. We did it ourselves, a lot of walking and putting and distributing. I know, it was successful.
When we came back to Bundanon to reopen the self-service store, we bought the building from Jack Carlisle's father. Jack Carlisle at that stage owned the news agency in Bundanon. The first shop we had in Bundanon was 7 days a week, and when we reopened the second store, the self-service, we did 5.5 days a week. Well, in the first shop we'd probably open about 8 o'clock, and quite often we wouldn't close until midnight, because in those days the picture theatre was operating and it would get big crowds of people at the pictures, and they'd come down at half time. And also there were a lot of people came to Bundanon by train for holidays, and the trains would come in around about midnights, so they'd all come down looking for a cup of tea. So the first shop was extremely long hours.
The first shop, I used to go to the markets once a week or sometimes twice a week, and the markets were in the Haymarket at Sydney in those days. I'd leave home about 2 a.m. I'd arrive back home at 12 o'clock, about 11 or 12 o'clock the next like that night. Shirley was there, and we would unload the fruit and vegetables, and also we had a big trailer which we had groceries on, and we used to have to unload the groceries, because then we had to be ready to open up again at 8 o'clock in the morning. So we get to bed about 2 o'clock and get up again at 8 o'clock. It was quite an ordeal, but we were young and we were active and we were healthy. You know, we had a big load on. The reason we put the groceries on the trailer was the road tax in those days, fruit and vegetables, road tax was only 2 and 6 for the truck, but the groceries were so much per tonne per mile. I forget what it was. And I know I went for about 2 years and never got pulled up, and I never paid any road tax. But one of our opposition reported us, and the next week we got pulled up at Liverpool, and the chap, he said, "Look, I'm sorry to pull you up," he said, "but you've been reported." He said, "But look," he said, "what I'd do," he said, "I'd take the groceries off the truck and put them on the trailer." And he said, "Then you only pay for the weight of the trailer, but on the truck you pay for the truck, the engine, everything, because they charge a lot." So it cut our road tax down by about 80% having the trailer. And the other thing was we could carry an extra tonne.
In that first shop too, after 6 o'clock at night you were not allowed to sell groceries, so we had to put up these big shutters to completely cover the grocery shelves so that no groceries were displayed after 6 o'clock at night.
Luckily the police at the time was mainly Roy White, and he was a sergeant, and Jack Hardman, the constable. One of them was walk down the street every night when I was away and check the shelf was okay, and it was very good of them.
I know the council health inspector from Mossvale used to come regularly and check the milkshake mixers and the ice cream containers and made sure everything was clean.
Well, we used to sell bulk milk. We used to, they used to get milk poured into the containers, and the ice cream came in 2.5 and 5 gallon ice cream containers. We used to scoop it out, and you had to always be 100% clean. In those days we used to weigh sugar and flour and ice of sugar and rice and sago, all those things we had to weigh up. It was Department of Weights and Measures, and they'd check the scales. Probably about every 6 months they come and check your scales. It didn't matter if you gave the customer half an ounce extra, but you must not give them half an ounce less. We sold to Bill Olds and his wife, and they had son and daughter. They both worked in the shop with them. I think Judy Olds is still in Bundanoon, and they ran quite a good business. We stayed in Bundanoon because we had Hill Street flats at the time down opposite the Catholic Church, and we also had a place now known again as Milton Hall. We bought it from Miss Cusack. She'd had it many years as a guest house, a small guest house, and we converted it back to 2 big flats. Miss Cusack called it Glendalough. We left it that name, but then the people went back to the original name, Milton Hall, which was the name of the people who built it in the first place. It was the previous house. It was around, we never saw it. It was gone long before we have seen photos of it. It was a round house, and they used to call it the wedding cake house.
My name is Marianne Ward, and I am interviewing Isabel Greason on the 7th of February 2006 at her home at number 3 Barnett Street, Bundanoon. And so Isabel, good afternoon, and I wonder if you would mind telling me your full name.
Yes, Isabel Susanna Greason,
Right.
or was Klein. I was married on the 17th of July 1937 to Robert Greason.
Do you remember when your father first bought the business in Bundanoon? What age would you have been then?
Well, the first time I'd be about 10, I suppose.
Wow. And then some time in Beecroft?
Yes, because I went to high school there, and that'd be 14 or 15, I suppose I'd be. And then we came back to Bundanoon, and he bought the business back again, the bakery business. And then they bought the shop in Bundanoon, where the estate agent is now, and that was a gift shop, because that's when I used to wave to Bob out the window up top. He was over in the butcher's shop, you see, and
He was on the other side of the
he was
line.
on the other side of the
train
line,
line.
but at 8 o'clock each morning I'd go and wave to him from the bedroom window.
Oh, that's a lovely story.
Yes, so, but there we met him through his sister. I was bridesmaid for Rennie, his sister, and I thought he was nothing to me, you know, but then, anyway, that's how it happened. I was working in the shop because we always had the baker's shop, and then we had the gift shop. Yeah, well, this is where I did my courting days there, from that place. Although Dad had the baker's, and where the hairdresser is now, that was Dad's baker's shop, and they built that room on where the hairdresser is now. And that was when we were teenagers. I used to have all my friends, and we had parties there, like, you know, And poor old Dad and Mum would be asleep, you know, but they put up with it all because they had to start work at 3 o'clock in the morning, you see. So anyway, we used to go down the gullies and catch the yabbies and cook them in the pot down there. And we used to come home on Jack Shepherd's a truck, you know, up Constitutional Hill. I think half the time we had to push it up, and this would be about a dozen or so of us, you know. They were wonderful days, different now. And then, of course, I met Bob. I must have known him in the baker's shop. Anyway, I met him, and then we went out together to the old picture shows. And
were they in the Bundanoon Hall in those days?
No, they were down past the hotel. It used to be the picture theatre down there, yes. And we used to have a little upstairs, and some friends of ours, and Miss Meany and Mrs. Lyons from the Heidelberg there, you know. It is the Gastoff now. They used to own that, and Miss Meany and Mrs. Lyons and her husband used to sit up top, and there'd only be 8 of us up in this little, you know, upstairs. Otherwise it was all downstairs. And then we always had concerts with Frank Bryce and Mr. Monaghan or something like that. And
where were the concerts held?
They were held over there in that hall, that same hall. They were great days too. We had a great amateur people, like, you know. This would be, yes, during the 30s, because it was before I was married. Yes, in the 1930s. We were in the baker's shop during the Depression, because all the swaggies and different people, fellows, you know, used to come with their swags, and Dad would give them so much. And during the Depression, he'd give so much bread and pies and cakes away, you know, to different people. But yes, that was bad.
So where was your first house as a young married? Whereabouts?
Well, we used to live next door to Bob's mother, which was Mrs. Fitzell's house, and then we built this, and I have been here ever since. I've been here about 68 years I have lived in this house. Lucy's father was the designed the house, and Joe Council and Wilfred Council, they built the house, because it's 25 years since Bob died.
Yeah. What was it like in Bundanoon, say, in those days when you were a late teenager, you know, 18 or 19? Well, what was Bundanoon like?
It was lovely, because we had to make our own enjoyment, and we used to meet down the street. We'd go to the pictures. I think that they were in the new hall by then, and we used to go and have coffee and things like this after the pictures and wander home.
How often were the pictures, Isabel?
Every Saturday.
2 pictures and an interval?
Yes, and we'd have packed houses too down there. Then at Christmas time we'd have parties, of course, and then at New Year we'd meet down in the main street at the railway there, and we'd do the hokey pokey and all this dancing to see the new year in, you see.
So the whole village would turn, just about?
Yes, they would too, and all those young people would turn up, and I can remember doing the hokey pokey. Yeah, it was the hokey pokey, I think.
Happy days.
Yes, they were wonderful days. But we had to make our own entertainment. And of course I used to play golf and tennis, and Mum and Dad were great golfers too, you see. And they were president of everything, I think, in the town, Mum and Dad.
Isabel, how about we have a talk about what it was like in Bundanoon during wartime, those war years. That would be just after you and Bob had married.
That's right.
Was he still here?
He was still here because he had to stay home and look after the business. A sad time, really, because we had blackouts. We had to have blackout things on our windows and everything like that, and we had spotting because Bob and Mum and Dad sat on top of the hallway there and had to check all the aeroplanes and things like this that went over. That wasn't very many, of course. I used to laugh about that. But
That was every night? Somebody was on a roster?
Yes, up there, sitting up on top of the hall there. You know, the entrance of the hall.
Yes, I know.
There, sitting up there in their little hut. I think they went every night. But it was a sad time. We all had to work, because I know I knitted hundreds of pairs of socks. Everyone knitted socks to send overseas, and parcels and things like that, you see. But everyone worked hard. We had rationing, butter, sugar, tea and meat. I think the petrol was rationed too, but we were okay because we were butchers with our meat, but we used to help people out, you know. They were very generous, the Greasons, giving away meat, things like that.
Did the visitors still come up to Bundanoon?
Yes, they had to evacuate up here, you see, all from the city, that's right, up to Greenways. The school came up there, and you'd remember that.
I do, I think it was Kincoppel.
That's right, yes, they were up at Greenways. Yes, we had lots of evacuees because Mum had a house up there in Viewland Street, and the next door to Mum, they used to let that to different people from Sydney, you know, and...
So the village was still reasonably busy in a different way,
in a different way. We had lots of people here, but all from the city.
This is Marianne Ward, and I'm talking to Ross Council, and it is the 17th of January 2007. Ross and his wife Bess have lived for most of their life in Barnett Avenue in Bundanoon, first at number 10 and then at number 8, and he has now moved with his wife to Harbison in Moss Vale. So I'm now going to ask Ross to tell us a little bit about him and his family and the family's life in Bundanoon.
Born in Guildford, suburb of Sydney, on the 31st of August 1923, and we moved to Bundanoon about 4 months after that. First place we lived in was out near Jumping Rock, which is next to where Joyce's are now. It was a slab hut. Dad built another house out there then. We stayed in there for a few years until I was 4 or 5, and we moved into a house at the back of the Bundanoon Primary School, belonged to Beermans.
Do you remember much about that time when the family settled at Jumping Rock?
No, as I said before, 1923, and we left there about 1928, 29. We didn't go into town. Well, Mum and Dad used to play tennis at a place called Spacklands, that's on the way out to Jumping Rock. And they used to play tennis with Don Bradman, actually. He used to come up with his future wife and to visit her relatives.
Not cricket?
No, tennis.
Tennis.
Dad was Joseph Henry, always called Joe, and Mum was Ethel Sophie. She was born in Bordertown. Dad was born in Strathalbyn, South Australia. They went to Broken Hill from there. That's where they married. And then in 1921 or 2, they moved to Guildford. Wilfred and Alwyn, and the two brothers were older, my sister was younger. The two brothers were born in Broken Hill. My sister was born in Bundanoon.
The sister was?
Audrey.
What do you remember of school?
at Bundanoon?
Oh, I only had two teachers there, in the, what we call the middle class and the big class. The small one was, we had a Miss Evans. She used to live at Daventry actually, that belonged to the Beamans. And the Bill Hawes, he was the headmaster. He lived next door to the school. For a while, and then he built a house around Penrose Road. It was a stone house.
And do you remember a bit about your school life? Was it a happy time for you?
Oh yeah, yes, we were doing pretty well there.
And some of your school friends and classmates?
Yes, there's still some of them still around. Or there's Noel Phillips. We were in the same class, we were the same age. Ron Grayson, Arthur Tooth. Oh, I could rattle off. A couple more still there. Or Lucy was another one, she was in my class. We all went to Barrel High then. We used to catch the train at 8:15 in the morning. And then when we get to Barrel, we'd walk up a mile and a half to the school. Then we'd have PE after a mile and a half walk. Then we'd catch a goods train home with a carriage on the end of it.
What sort of things did you do after school or in the holidays?
Well, I used to spend a lot of time down the Bundanoon Gullies with a cousin.
Which cousin was that?
Mervyn Barlas. His mother was Dad's sister. She came from Broken Hill too. Now we used to spend nearly all our weekends and school holidays down the gullies. Yeah, right down the river, fish and go from one end of the gullies to the other, from the coal mine around to the Glowworm Glen. We'd walk around below the escarpment and above the escarpment. We'd just keep walking. More tracks then than there is now, I think. We helped make a few more, but it was good. We didn't have a swim down the river, of course. There was no swimming pool at Bundanoon then.
And what sort of fish did you catch in the river?
Oh, crayfish, mostly.
Who made the little holders for the water wheels at Ferry Bow?
Ferry Bow. Well, I helped. Yes, we used to make the little water wheels there.
That was something that I loved doing as a child. Yeah.
Yes, we used to make, every time we went down there, the whole family used to go down there sometimes. And Dad would come down after work and pick us all up. Yes, there were 2 tracks down to Ferry Bow, apart from the one around the bottom. Used to walk from Riverview around to there. We used to have a lot of family visitors from all over the place. They come from Broken Hill too, originally. I've still got a lot of relatives in Broken Hill. Yeah.
And so how old were you when you met Bess?
I suppose about 17, wasn't I? When I went into the army and we got married more or less straight away then.
And so you and Bess married?
1942.
And where were you married? In Bundanoon?
No, Newcastle. 3rd of November 1942. Actually, we rented a flat at Greenways. It was the staff quarters up on the hill. We converted it into a flat. So we were there for 12 months or more.
Well, just that your father helped build.
He built it. He was the builder.
Yes.
And
did he build it for Sid Everett?
Yeah. Sid and Bert, I think it was. Bert Everett. Yeah, there was two brothers. They moved up from Mossvale, and then he built the house where you are now.
Yes.
He built the house there for them. Then they liked Bundanoon, they decided to build a guest house. So Dad built that. That was the first job I had when I left school, working over there. And that was November 38, I think. And then we were building it when the bushfires come through in 39, January 14th. We battled to save it, which we did. It's come up out of the gullies there, down around the road that goes around below Greenways. Come up at Garland Road, got right over the top of that, went up to the top of the hill where you are. Actually, the Everett was still living in that then. And they used to send a bit of tucker and drinks out to the boys around the area.
So Greenways was actually built as flats, wasn't it?
No, built as a guest house.
Oh, guest house.
And then when the war came, the Ken Copper Convent from Rose Bay came there. They were in there for a few years. It was a convent then. And then it reverted back to a guest house for a while and then turned into flats. Had a couple of fires there over the years. It was 39 fire came through Penrose, 65 went through Winslow and Tallong. They were the main ones. There was another one about 83, I think. something like that.
So were you involved with the 65 ones?
Yeah, we had a lot to do with that. We went right through the gullies and come up the back of Greenways. They just fought like any normal fire. The crew turns out, if you got enough water, you pump it onto them. We had the fire brigade from Moss Vale, the town brigade from Moss Vale, and a couple of the district bushfire brigades. That was in the 65 fire.
Right. At that stage, they didn't use things like helicopters or...
No, there was no helicopters around then. We had quite a few fires down the gullies and around the coal mine. And
Russ, on your wall you've got this wonderful plaque with an axe on it. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yes, that was a presentation from the bushfire, from the town brigade when I left the fire brigade. When I retired, I had to retire at a certain age. They presented me with that as a memento. One of the heads from the New South Wales Fire Brigade came up and made the presentation. Been captain of Bundanoon for 30 years then, 1959, 1989.
And underneath it there's the Bundanoon Rural Fire Brigade.
Yeah, which I spent 20 years with, less war service.
So that's a long time.
Fighting fires.
Dangerous work.
It's a risk you've got to take and anything can happen. Sometimes a tree will fall on your truck, or that seem to be the most losses they get is trees falling and they rarely get burnt. Oh yeah, someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I'm David Thomas Lidgard, and I was born at Ashfield in Sydney on the 30th of October 1941. My parents was Stan, and my mother's name was Helen. She was Helen Jones. My father was born in Halden Street, Lakemba, and my mother was born at Canamble. We moved from Maryland in Sydney, that's where I was living, and I come up here and I wanted a little bit of acreage because I'd come off a poultry farm and I was still interested in that for myself, sort of thing. And I wanted a reasonably new home, and I looked from Mittagong right through to Bundanoon. A lot of houses. And the last house I looked at was Lucy Rocker took me down and showed me David Clegg's place, which is 47 acres of what Ashgrove Place is now. That was a 47-acre farm. I bought his house and the house yard. Just under 1 acre is what I got, yeah.
Was that the corner house?
Yeah.
Of
the
Ashgrove?
The black brick.
On the
dark brick
yes.
on the right-hand side when you turn in. It was a paddock.
So tell us the story that you know of the history group and the shed, the old good shed.
Yeah, well, how I got involved with the history group was when I was president of the BCDA, and Norma Edmonds and Lucy Rocker come and met me one day in the back of the hall in the supper room, and they were looking for somewhere for the history group to have a base because everything was on Norma's back veranda up where she lived at Ringwood. The big plan drawers that you got was on her back veranda, and she was wanting to find a home for everything. And the hall wasn't suitable, and we were still looking around or the history group was still looking for somewhere to make a home. And I was walking past the memorial hall just before Anzac Day, and Carl Manning was painting the front of the hall. He looked across at the old goods shed, and he said to me, he said, Dave, he said, you know, if someone organised the paint, I reckon James Peters and I could paint that shed one weekend and make it look better in the street. I said, leave it with me, Carl, I'll find the paint for you. And I walked across to the post office and I met Ken Phillips. And I said to Ken, I've just found a place for the history group. And he said, where? I said, the old goods shed. Oh, no, he said, we couldn't use that. He said, it's too dirty. I said, no, I said, we could clean it up and we'll build a room inside the shed. And then that's what the history group went for a grant from council and got $3,000. And I organised the different builders in town to do the work. and Everlock supplied the front door and the window, and Phil Tasdas and Carl Berg and Ian Serene and different other builders all did what I told them to do, and you've now got a history group shed. But I even organised all your brick paving and everything around it, and that was a little sneaky trick I'd done on council, and I got away with it. So Alan Newton, who was the council representative then, he was organising works for up at the Oval. It was through him, and I approached him about finishing off around there was no brick paving in front of the history group shed. Where the bus stop sign was the end of the curb and gutter, and the other curb and gutter was round where the railway fence is. You used to be able to back your truck in up to those doors. The dirt went down, not up like it is now. And I said to Alan Newton, I said, we want to tidy this up for the history group and put the curb and gutter in and put brick paving in. And he said, oh, no, council hasn't got that sort of money. And he said to me later, he contacted me and he said, I've had a talk. He said, if you'd like to put all the formwork in for the curb and gutter, the council will supply you the concrete. And I thought to myself, no, that's your job, I'm not doing that. And then in the meantime, council had a reshuffle and Alan Newton was made redundant. Anyway, when he was made redundant and a period of time went on, and a young fellow, a cadet fellow from council, went and saw my daughter Bernice, who was a computer programmer at council, and he said, where can I find your father? And she said, what's he done now? And he said, no, I've got a thing here about he needs some work done out at the history group shed. He said, I want to meet him. So we had a meeting out there and he asked me what I wanted, and I said, well, I want the curb and gutter all finished and the brick paving and a path down to the door of the history group shed and all finished off. And the next thing, the fellow went off, and the next day he rang me up and he said, yes, I've had a talk and we've found the money and we'll do the job. So you got your brick paving and the curb and gutter, and I didn't have to put the formwork up. So, and there was a house I was working on in Erra Street, and it had one of the old lights off the railway station on the front veranda. And I said to the chap, if ever you move and you don't want that light, I would like it. And he didn't give it to me, and he threw it out on the clean-up week, and I happened to see it and I grabbed it. And now the history group have got it outside their shed. I remember too when we were doing the park, of course the fence used to only be about 4 foot off the gutter. I don't know if you ever knew that.
This is what the garden club call the picnic park, all along that strip.
All in front of the shop. Well, the fence, the bus shed used to be right on the gutter, and the fence was just behind the bus shed. It was Chris Bromfield come up with the idea of why not we make that a park. And Elizabeth Royal, John Royal's wife, said to me when we were doing it, she said, why don't we pull that old shed down and continue the park right to the end? I said, no way, I said. That's over 100 years old and there's a lot of history there. Otherwise, if she'd had her way, she would have had the shed pulled down. But I'm glad she didn't, because the history group have got somewhere to live. That's how the park and that all then come into it all. Yeah. And then when the park was all finished, Barry McDonald and myself had to move the bus shed back to where it is now. I put it on rollers and rolled it back, and then the concrete slab it was sitting on, they tore that up and took it away, so it's all grass. Although it would have been better, I think, if the concrete slab had been left there at the bus stop.